Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Achieve More podcast. My name is Anthony. You can find me on YouTube at Picksburgh. I do a lot of videos there with my girlfriend where we travel and do a lot of fun stuff. Also, you'll find this video format of the podcast uploaded there as well. With me, as always, I got my co-host Michael over at Huddle Card Collection. How you doing today, Michael?
Doing wonderful, Anthony. Doing wonderful. Thank you, sir. Hope all is well.
Man. Anything new and exciting going on with you over Huddle Card?
No, I just say, hey, if the first time listening, if you're into, sports cards, collectibles, that type of content, you want to see, we talk about the collectibles market, buying and selling sports cards, and how to go ahead and navigate that space. Come on over to Huddle Card, and hopefully, I can help you out. Go ahead and learn some stuff.
Absolutely. And every Wednesday night, Michael does a podcast called Collecting Profit. It's at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, so make sure you guys check that out. But without further ado, I'm really excited because today we have a special guest with us. We have Andy Semotiuk with us. He is a lawyer and an author. He's done some really cool things in his life, and Andy, I'm sure you could explain this way better than me. So without further ado, if you could just introduce yourself and anything you want to share with the audience.
Well, that's great. First of all, thanks for having me on your podcast. This is very exciting. It's nice to be able to share whatever you want on a podcast. Maybe a little bit about me. Mm-hmm. As you mentioned, I'm a lawyer. Actually, I'm an immigration attorney. I practice in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, but I'm a U.S. and Canadian attorney. I grew up half in the United States, Los Angeles area, and half in Canada, in Edmonton, Alberta. I'm Ukrainian in background. My folks came over from Ukraine to Canada, and some of my folks came down to the United States. I can tell you a bit more about that if you're interested. I've written 4 books, published 5. Of the books I've written, the most recent one is a book called Salomia, Star of Opera's Golden Age. And it's about my great aunt, who was the world's leading soprano in the first decade of the 19th century. Now, for those of you who are not opera fans or really into perhaps history and so on, hang on, don't tune out on me. There's reasons why I wrote that book that are not connected either with opera or with history. The book covers an extraordinarily interesting life and someone who achieved something at the very height of the area she chose to work in, which was opera. And I can share a bit about that book. And the reason I'm especially interested in that right at this moment is she rescued the opera Madame Butterfly, which is one of the world's most popular operas. It's among the top 5 operas in the world. She rescued it from infamy and a disaster at La Scala, which was the world's leading opera theater in Milan, in Italy, in 1904, and worked with a guy named Puccini, who was the composer of that opera, to make it the great success that it has been all this time. And this is the 120th anniversary of that opera's success in Italy. And I can tell you a little bit about that opera, the history of that particular opera and how it was turned into a success, which is an interesting story, I think. And I can talk about the war in Ukraine if you want, or immigration law, which is my area of interest. Or perhaps there's something else, young professionals, whatever is on your mind.
Sure. So just for example, what made you decide you wanted to practice law professionally?
Well, it was like this. As I was growing up, first I wanted to be a bus driver, then a fireman, and so on, like the rest of us. And over time, as I was growing up, my father died when I was pretty young, 9 years old, and I was sort of brought up by my mother. And my mother was hard of hearing. She was deaf. And she had a hard time dealing with the world and trying to figure out, what's what, business, banking, and so on. And she relied on me to kind of translate the world into her life and translate what she wanted into the world. And over time, I kind of developed a knack for kind of looking after things. So that was one of the reasons. But another one was a more idealistic one, and that was I was very troubled by conflict and wars in the world and how things were not going so well. People weren't getting along. And I thought, if I'd only study law and if I could learn law and if I'd be really good at it, then after I graduated, I could study a problem like the Middle East, for example, or Ukraine's war with Russia, and come up with a legal explanation of it, and then present it to all the parties, and they would go, well, of course, this is the answer. We should have followed the law. And so I imagined myself to be one day a great diplomat, a great, political leader, someone who knew the law so well. Well, of course, things don't just work by the law. The law is something important, but that's not the only thing that, governs human rights. There's emotions, there's self-interest, there's national interests, and a whole bunch of other things. So I ran a little short in that one, but that was the thinking going into law school, and somehow I got in, and I studied at UBC in Vancouver.
How difficult was the actual schooling? Was it as tough as people say? I could only imagine. That bar exam is crazy.
Yeah. I haven't mentioned, but I'm a member of the New York and California bars in the United States and the Ontario and BC bars in Canada. Those are the toughest bars in North America. Now, I never thought of myself as some great genius who could go out and write bar exams and become, I don't know, Henry Kissinger or someone like that. I've always been in that part of the class that makes the upper half look good. So I went to law school. I was, not a star, not a dummy, but not a star either. But over life, I learned that, as we go along, people fall off, left and right, and few of us survive. If you went to my graduation class with me, there's about 300 lawyers that graduated from UBC Law School, University of British Columbia in Vancouver, Canada. And you asked, of these 300 people, who's going to be around 5 decades later and be still a lawyer? I would have said, I'm the last guy on the list that's going to be a lawyer, and here I am, the last guy on the list. Here, and I find it hard to explain. I guess it's a career that adapted to me more so than I adapted to the career. I got into immigration law because it helped me be flexible in terms of travel and stuff like that. And in my life, I had to travel between Los Angeles and Edmonton because I had 2 elderly ladies in my life. One was my mother, who was 75, 80, 85, 90, and my aunt, her sister, who was 75, 85, 90. And they needed people to look after them. And my wife and I had this 5-year crisis in our lives where I was traveling back and forth trying to help these people and also carry on my career. So that's how it all happened.
Where did the inspiration to become a writer come from?
That's awesome that
I believe that everybody has a story to tell. I know the 2 of you have a story to tell. Otherwise, you wouldn't be on this program. There's something in you, something that's burning inside you that's got to get out. It's part of being human. whatever that message is inside you, the one that you really care about. That's the driving force that made me, in my case, write books. I'll tell you, if my first year university English teacher learned today that I've written, like 4 books, that I'm a Forbes writer and have been a writer for Forbes for 10 years, he would roll over in his grave. I barely made it through English 100 first year in university. And he took pity on me because he knew that if I didn't pass English, I wouldn't be able to go on in university. And he gave me a grade 50%, pass grade 50% on the last day of, first year classes. And for the longest time, I thought, I'm not a writer. I'm a talker. Like I like to, talk with guys like you and, share ideas and stuff like that. I thought I was a good presenter. And for 35 years, I was a member of an organization called Toastmasters, and I attended weekly meetings of clubs where we cultivated public speaking, presenting skills, and gave each other feedback on how to be better Toastmasters. And indeed, you'll see a little sign just above me, just up there. And that's my plaque for becoming a distinguished Toastmaster, which is the highest level you can get in the Toastmasters organization. And so I thought, hey, this is it. This is my life. But the world didn't want me to be a speaker, presenter so much as it wanted me to write the things that were burning inside me. And I started to write. Initially, I wrote a book called The Young Professional, and it was a career guidebook for people going through from university, going into the professions. And I noticed that they shared 3 things that bothered them a lot. And I don't know if maybe you're in the same category. I certainly am. The 3 things were money, time, and balance. 3 problems they were grappling with, those 3 problems: money, time, and balance. At any one time, it can be one, the other, or all 3, whatever. And I realized I should write about those themes and see if I can help them. As I did, the people who were going through my law practices, as I was helping them get immigration status. And that's where it all started. And I'll tell you this, if you write one book, I can almost guarantee you'll write more than one book. It's just part of, communication.
Yeah, I'd imagine once you get going and you express yourself that way creatively, it just opens up a whole new channel that you'd want to continue to express yourself with.
As creative and as
what was it like becoming a Toastmaster?
Okay. Well, as I mentioned, for 35 years I was attending club meetings. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot about how to, there are things like stand straight, don't say all the time, all the time. I have a habit of saying, a lot. So I had to smarten up. Don't say, Look at your audience, keep eye contact, smile once in a while. Don't be a morbid individual. Here's a key thought that I picked up at Toastmasters. The most important presentations that you might make do not or are not done, if you're going to be a great presenter, are not written. You don't write a speech and then give this great speech to someone. And I'll just show you why that's true with a little experience in my own life. The biggest presentation I ever made in my life was to ask my wife, Annie, if she would marry me. Now, to do that, I didn't write out, type out on the computer, my talk, what I'm going to say to her, and then go to her and pull out my speech. Say, Annie, and then read out. No, that's not the way it works. I sat down with her and I spoke from here to there, to her heart, and I spoke with ideas. I communicated ideas. I wasn't communicating words. I used words to communicate the ideas, but I was going from idea to idea and from my heart to her heart. And I believe that's a key insight into good presentations. It's not about writing the words out. If you're stuck on the words, you're
makes a lot of sense.
your audience. You need to be paying attention to who you're talking to and how they're reacting to you, not because you're thinking, oh, well, am I looking good? Is my hair right? Is my right makeup on or whatever, right? Not for that reason, but because you're interested in what they are thinking and how they're responding to this conversation. Like we are right now. We're in the middle of a conversation, the three of us. And why should we be any different here than we are when we go, through the corridor at the office, talking to one another, or at a ball game or whatever? The conversation is natural. We don't have to think out the ideas. We don't have to practice how we're going to say it. We just say it. There's a convergence of thinking, and there's a convergence of ideas and feelings in a bona fide, a genuine conversation. And the same is true in presentations.
Did you get involved with Toastmasters as you were becoming a lawyer to help you when you had to present, or was it kind of after, during the same time, along those lines?
It was while I was a lawyer. At first, I wasn't that keen on Toastmasters. The first few meetings I went to, I didn't think, this is people giving presentations. I don't know if I belong here. But in time, I kind of realized that, hey, these people are trying to improve themselves. They're trying to be better people, better communicators. And to me, I told you already, my mother was deaf. So communication was like a key skill in my life. You really needed to know how to communicate. If you've ever dealt with deaf people, for example, my mother read lips, so she could tell what you were saying by just reading what your lips were, how your lips were moving. That's a form of communication too. Not everybody can do it, but she was able to do that. But so as I realized how important communication was to the people at Toastmasters, I started paying attention. And I looked for the best communicators that there were in the organization and elsewhere. And I went to the National Speakers Association, for example, and I attended conferences there. And I watched the great speakers of our time. People like Zig Ziglar, Jim Rohn, Anthony Robbins, all these big communicators. And I tried to learn whatever I could from them.
It's really awesome. Did that help you a lot as far as, actually practicing law, or did it help you more so towards your, literary journey?
Well, I'll tell you how it helped me. When I got into law, like I'm doing immigration law right now, and there's a lot to it. Like in your field, anything you do, there's a lot to it. You got to learn things, right? Not everything you do you must like. For example, if you looked at my life today, right now, in my office, watch me while I'm doing, what you'd see is I'm writing at a computer all day, answer the phone, walk around, make photocopies, back on the computer, changing things. That's my life. And over time, I start thinking, well, hey, wait a minute. No, I mean, like I had to look up cases, and I got books back of me there. Read all these dull books on law, and like there's a limit to how much you can absorb. And I started asking myself, well, I like law, but there are aspects of law that are less exciting for me, and there are other things that I like to do. So how could I become a better lawyer? And I came up with this kind of thought. Why don't I use the things that I'm the best at in my legal career? So as it turned out, I was a good communicator. I mentioned Toastmasters, and I mentioned that I write articles and books. And I realized, so I'm pretty good at communication. I may not be the world's greatest communicator. There might be, I don't know who it is, but maybe it's not me. But I'm pretty darn good at it, and I like it. It's something I'm on this call right now, this podcast, because I love communication.
Mm-hmm.
And so I start making more room in my law practice for communication. So I'd do writing. I'd write articles. I would do research and prepare briefs and things like that to use my writing skills. And I went to courtrooms and I argued cases, and I attended in meetings in boardrooms and made presentations. More of that and less photocopy, sit at the computer and type, answer phone calls. And I tried to find other people who were good at these other skills that maybe I wasn't as good at, to match my skills. And the 2, 3, 4, 5 people, if we combined them together, we became better as a team doing what we're doing than if we all had to do all those skills like typing, answering phone calls, and so on. And that's how I used what I believe to be my unique ability, communication, as one of my unique abilities to advance myself in my career.
Very good.
That's really awesome. That's great structure. It is to staff your weaknesses or the things that you dislike, so that you can really thrive on the things you do. Like I always go to sports, but Tony Gwynn was one of the best hitters of all time. But I read in a book that he practiced hitting more than he practiced anything else, just because he just wanted to be that much better at it. Yeah. So that's really, really cool. I wanted to ask, you did mention, writing for Forbes and stuff. How is it being a Forbes contributor? Is that exciting for you?
Yes, it was. And it is. There's pressure involved because I have to write articles every week. For example, I have to write an article by Friday right now. As just one example. And I'm not the kind of I'm not an opinionated guy that's got all kinds of opinions that I can just roll out whenever you want. My daughter, Natalie, she's opinionated. She'll give you an opinion on anything. I have to think about that. Like if you ask me what's my opinion on, I don't know, any big issue, I don't know, gambling, for example, I have to think about it. I don't have an opinion. I gotta, I gotta read about it and come up with a view. And so it's a challenge. It's a challenge for me to come out with these articles. And I don't want to come out with fluff or, just like writing for the sake of, I don't like share in the world. I don't want garbage. Forgive me, but there's a lot of people shoveling garbage out onto the internet, just to get stuff out there, thinking, well, that's going to make a name for them. I really like quality, like when I wrote that book, the book I mentioned to you, Solomia, Star of the Golden Age of Opera. It took me 10 years to write that book. And I did a lot of research. I spent a lot of time on that book, man. And part of it was love, but the other part is I wanted to do a good job, because look, we're only going through life it's one time, right?
Yeah.
So put out your best. You got to get out there and put out your
Yeah.
best. And so that's what I try to do. And writing for Forbes, I try to.
After 10 years, how did you know it was finally time to let the book out?
Well, I had over 100 people helping me with writing the book. Let me just share one little story from the book. It's a story about Madame Butterfly, because it's the 120th anniversary. But I think if I share that story with you, you'll understand better why I thought it was worth the effort and why I think the book is worthwhile. So a little bit about that story. It's a story about an American naval officer named Pinkerton, who goes to Japan at the time when the United States was opening up Japan. I think it was in the 1800s, because Japan had been a closed society and not open to the world. So the U.S. Navy came to Japan and it was opening it up. And he met a young girl, a teenage girl named Chiyo Sun, who was a geisha girl, meaning a girl who sort of entertained men, in geisha houses. And they had a bit of a relationship. And following, sleeping with her and so on, they actually got married, according to Japanese custom. And in a while, he announced to her, hey, listen, this is nice, but I have to go back to America. I'm being called back to America. But he said to her, don't worry, Chiyo, son, I will come back to you. And he left. But he did not know when he left that she was pregnant and that she would give birth to his son. And so she waited for him, waited 1 year, 2 years, many years. And as she waited, the son grew up, grew older and older. And only about 5 years later, Pinkerton came back one day in a boat, in a ship. And she was ecstatic to see that he had returned and, was keeping his promise. But only then she learned that he had brought with him an American wife in tow. And soon enough, they had this crisis. The crisis was, what are we going to do about this young boy? Should the boy stay with the mother and be raised in a geisha house environment? Or would the boy be better off going with the father and the American bride back to the United States? And they decided, the two parents, that it would be better for the boy to go back to the United States with the father. And one of the final scenes in the opera is Chiyo's son pulls the little boy off to the side. He's about 5 years old. And she says to him these words. She says, look at this face. It is the face of your mother. Remember it. You will never see it again. And the boy goes off with the father, leaving the mother behind. And she later commits suicide and dies. That's how the opera dies. That's how the opera concludes. Now, this story was brought to the United States from Nagasaki, Japan, by a journalist who was there and heard this story and wrote an article about it and published it in a newspaper in the United States. And when it was published, there was a playwright who read about it and thought, hey, this is a great story. I can make a play out of this. And he put together a play, and they showed it in London, at one of the theaters in London. And just then, when that play was on, this guy named Giacomo Puccini, who was one of Italy's greatest composers, who was already pretty much at the top of his game, was in London on a vacation and went to see the play. And he was so moved by the story I just told you, that he went to the playwright afterwards and almost choking the guy with enthusiasm, saying, I have to get the rights to this play. I'm gonna make an opera out of this. And the guy, he wrote later, how do you deal with an enthusiastic Italian that's got his hands around your neck? Of course you're going to give in. So he got the rights, and he put together the opera. And he figured, hey, this is such a good opera. I'm going to stage it at the world's top opera house, La Scala in Milan. And I'm going to call together the top singers. There's this lady named Rosina Storchio and this guy named Zonatello to sing in the lead roles in this opera to make sure, it's going to go. Now, my great aunt was not part of that. She was not involved at that stage. And he put it on. And he was so confident that it would be successful that he invited his family members, his son and his sister, to be at the premiere, which was against his normal practice. He never did that ever at premieres because it was bad luck, he thought. But this one was a sure hit, no problem. So he invited them all. Now, that night, this is in 1904, La Scala, Milan, they're putting on this Madame Butterfly opera for the first time. For some reason, everybody on the cast was nervous. Puccini himself was smoking constantly, walking back and forth. Rosina Storchio was uncomfortable, like this. Even the audience felt something's, just not right. But the show must go on, so it went on. And as soon as it started going, as soon as they started singing and so on, the reaction was negative. The audience started booing, hissing, calling out things, saying, La Bohème, which is another opera. They're saying, it's like La Bohème, this other opera that was famous, and so on. So much so that by the time the opera finished, it was like a catastrophe. And the next day, all the newspapers, Puccini lays a bomb. It's terrible, disaster. So much so that Puccini, heartbroken, figured, I have to cancel the run. It's just not going to go. So he canceled the run. And he's, forlorn that this opera's, he put his life's heart into it, and it's just not working. And he thought, I'll go talk to my friend, Arturo Toscanini, who was one of the world's leading conductors back then, and ask him, what should I do? And he went to this guy, Toscanini. He says, look, Arturo, help me. This is the love of my life. I want this opera to succeed, but I don't know what to do. And Toscanini said, you know what? You ask Solomia Krushelnitska, who was then at the top of her game and one of the world's leading opera stars. This is 1904 in Italy. Ask her to help you. And he went to her. Puccini went to her. He said, look, can you help me with this? And because they were friends, Puccini, Toscanini, Solomia Krushelnitska, she said, okay, I'll do it. And they spent several months preparing this opera for another show, another premiere. And they picked the spot to be Brescia, about 60 miles east of Milan, at the Teatro Colon in 1904. And to prepare for it, Solomia wore a Japanese kimono for several months to get into the role, because she was going to play Chiyo Chiyo-san. And they reworked the storyline, together. They worked and improved it. And on the night of the premiere in the Teatro Colón, again, everybody's nervous. Puccini smoking like one after another, like he's chain smoking all night long. And Solomia has got this worry. She's in her 30s and she's got to portray a teenager. It's not going to be that easy. And this is like asking Julia Roberts, hey, we know that Sandra Bullock just collapsed in a major, television or movie in Hollywood, but would you be willing to play the lead role? We're going to do it again. See if you could do it. I mean, like, this is a challenge. But she said, well, we'll do it. And so they staged it. And to make a long story short, the audience calmed down immediately as soon as Solomia started singing. Now, she had a golden voice. It was a unique voice. And she overcame the resistance to, was this 30-year-old singing a 15-year-old part. And there were ovations given by the audience during the performance. And at the end of the performance, they gave 7 standing ovations to the opera.
Oh, wow.
7 standing ovations, yeah. And it went on from there all over Europe and elsewhere, like to Africa and South America and so on. Solomia sang the role 100 times, and on the 100th time, she said, okay, that's it. I'm giving you the notes back. And it went on from there. So that's a little story from the book.
It's amazing.
I hope,
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, so hearing that story, where can people actually find this book? Is it available on Amazon? Is it in bookstores?
It's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. There's an audio book. The book's an audio book. Just look up Solomia, Solomea, Star of Opera's Golden Age, and you'll find it on Amazon. As you can my other books, look.
And your other books are also?
Yeah, there's. I've got another
Fantastic.
book about, one's called The Promise Kept. The others I've mentioned already, The Young Professional, and I've written a humor book as well. It's called The Treasure Chest of Humor. It's all on Amazon.
That's very cool being published for a book. That's awesome.
Yeah. Question for you. We normally ask this of everybody, but what would you say has led you to be as successful as you are? Like, what are some attributes or what are some tangible things that you've noticed about, that's led you to kind of be a successful lawyer, to be able to author 4 books? Being that you've said, you weren't the strongest when it came to your studies in English and stuff like that, but somehow you've overcome and done tremendous things. What are some of those things that have kind of led you to be able to do that?
Well, the answer is quite simple. And we've talked about it already, boys, on this podcast. It's what's in your heart. What really, really matters to you. Find it inside yourself and in your history. It's there somewhere in that heart of yours. Dying to get out, but not crying out loud enough for you to hear it unless you listen carefully. I call that your unique ability. There's something inside you that's unique, that's different than everybody else. And you can find it by asking yourself, what do I really care about? Ask, what do you spend your money on? What matters to you? How do you feel when you're doing something? Like if you're doing this right this moment, right now, are you so absorbed in what you're doing that time is just drifting by and you don't even notice it? And if it's not, then maybe this isn't your unique ability. What would you spend your life at and enjoy doing it? Never mind if people are paying you or not. like in my case, this is one of my unique abilities in that sense, that I'm willing to go out and talk about topics like this with guys like you because I love this area.
Mhm.
And if you work in a unique ability area, what happens is you can compete with anybody because it's in your unique ability. Not everybody has this ability. And since you can compete with others, you may not be the best in the world. There may be better than you. I've mentioned that already. But it's the best you can give the world. And put it in the service of others. If you're doing it for yourself, you've missed the point. Like you've been given a unique ability so that you can help others with it. Now you can profit from it. Like I'm selling books. I don't, I get money from selling books. Like I'm not going to make a fortune from selling books. At least that's the way it is for most people anyway. So it's not like you can't make money from your unique ability. In fact, you can make money. In fact, you can compete with people and that's the way you're going to make good money, is because you're in your unique ability and sharing it with others. So that's the message. That's the message, guys.
It's a great message. I mean, it's
incredible advice.
Yep, I agree.
Typically, towards the end of the podcast, we have a couple segments that we do. The first one's called No Dumb Questions, where we take an audience member's questions and we let them ask our guests. So this week, if you had chosen a different career path, what would you have chosen?
I got two kids. They're adults. But they keep saying you should have been a professor, because as you can see, I'm good at lecturing people, right? So I suppose that would be the answer: is I should have been a professor, but it just wasn't in my cards for me, So I'm a lawyer, and I do stuff like this. I'd be curious to know about you guys and your answers to that too.
That would be a real tricky.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Michael. If you know, go ahead. Give me a minute.
I honestly, I honestly don't know. I mean, I can't say that, and I guess I say that because, what I do for my normal living is kind of just something that fell into going through life and everything. So this is probably what I was, supposed to go ahead and do in a way.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't going to be, a little too short to be a professional basketball player. So, from that standpoint.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. I'm kind of the same in that regard. Whereas, my goal was always to be a Steeler or to be Hulk Hogan. Was not good enough to get a scholarship for football. I was actually perfecting my hips and most of my body. So I have a unique ability to where most of the career paths I would have wanted to try, I have tried. But to be honest, the one thing that I would absolutely love to do, that if I had to go back and do it again, I would love to be like a sportscaster, like, Stephen A. Smith or somebody like, I come on YouTube and do this stuff for free, I make some money, but it's compared to like a job, you could say for it, you know what I mean? Like, to actually be able to come on and share my opinion, get paid for it.
He's on fire.
And, yeah, like just.
Yeah. It's not too late, man.
So yeah, that would be what I would do.
Not too late. You can still try.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah.
Very true. And one day I very well may. Our next segment that we have is called We Have to Ask, but You Do Not Have to Answer. The question we have for you this week is, what is the wildest thing that you have ever encountered practicing law?
Well, there are some things I'm not able to share because I have a duty of confidentiality.
Yeah.
But one thing
Definitely.
I can share is I'm not going to name any names, but I encountered a person, a male, and became good friends with a male who, I went to meetings with, and we sort of chummed around, sort of knew each other. And one day he came to my office, but he had had a sex change, and he was now a female. And now, these days, big deal. That happens quite often. But this was like 30 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was really quite an astounding thing that he did. And I had to sort of figure out how to react to this. I told you I don't have, and I'm not an opinionated guy with a million opinions. I have to kind of figure out what is my opinion. And maybe luckily, or I felt, well, to each his own. That's my sort of attitude. And I figured, well, okay, if that's what you want. He was an adult. And so from that time on, I treated him as a woman. And that was, to me, quite an astounding thing. Nowadays, listen, I went, let me tell you a little story. I went to Broadway, to New York, to the Opera House. I'm not by the way, I'm not an opera guy. I don't go to every opera that's in town. I'm not like that. Occasionally, I go now, especially because I wrote this book. So some friends of mine said, hey, there's an opera going on and you have to be there, because we knew the conductor, the person who was leading the opera. So I said, okay, I'm going. So before the opera, they said, we're going for supper to a restaurant that was owned by Lady Gaga's mother. And it's an Italian restaurant not far from the opera. So, okay, let's go.
Oh, wow.
So we went to the opera. We're having dinner, and it's, now I don't want to get it wrong, but it's transvestites who were performing that night. They put on a concert, and they were like singing and dancing and so on. Like while we're eating supper, we had a whole concert, and it was normal. Like they have it every week, like I think it was Thursday night.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's how the world has changed from the times when I started till now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, 100%. Michael, do you have any final questions for Andy before we let him go today?
No, I just want to comment and say, hey, thank you for taking time out of your evening for us. We appreciate you going ahead and giving of your time to us. We understand that that taking time away from all this stuff is something that is we're very grateful that people go ahead and do that to give us that time. So we appreciate you coming on the show.
That's very nice of you. Thank you, both of you guys, for listen. I got to thank you for having me on your show, and I recognize you got lives to lead as well. And I'm hoping that I got a lot of meaning from this event, a lot of something interesting. And I hope you guys did too. And I hope the listeners 100%. Also enjoyed what we talked about.
I'm sure that they will. Is there anything you want to promote before we let you go?
No, I mentioned that, all my books are on Amazon. I'm with Pace Law Firm in Toronto. I do U.S. and Canadian immigration law if anybody wants to get a hold of me for that. I want to put in a good word for for Ukraine and the war with Russia. If people are dying there on the front every day, and they're not fighting just for themselves, but it's about borders and principles like freedom and respect for human rights and so on. I'm sure you guys understand. So, just bear that in mind.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks a lot for having me again. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, our pleasure. Guys, I appreciate you watching this episode. Until the next one, I hope you all take it easy and may God bless you.
From the